Oh,
And we're back on a suddenly not so casual winning Wednesday. It is the middle of the summer. It is August 9, 2023. It is the Shark and the Gun CFB Knowledge for College. We're getting you ready. Non-Power 5, previewing futures, plays, hype, and analysis. Gunzpicks. What's going on this evening, my brother?
man, the days are getting closer. We are almost there, almost nearly 2 weeks away before we get to week 0, baby. And this is the final prep show of the year. And I had to do it. I had to do it with my man, the Shark, because we are going to be running college football all season long. Make sure you check us out on the Shark Deep Waters Nation channel. It is going there this year. And man, I am excited and ready to do it. Let's get into it.
Absolutely. And I want to preemptively apologize for the camera issue I'm having here. In transit, coming down to Florida, this computer was unfortunately banged and it's slightly jolted. So it looks like I'm in a submarine looking out, but I love to do it. Why not be in the water? It is Sharky Waters Nation, 9 Words of Lifestyle. Ride the way we got the water. As Guns mentioned, we will be opening up a new YouTube channel this year. It will be the Sharky Waters Nation YouTube channel, the Shark and the Gun, top level of college football analysis, picks, prognostication, and conversation. And let's open up this conversation, Guns. We're going to talk futures in the non-Power 5 conferences. And as I mentioned in the intro, for those of you guys who have tailed us the last couple of years, we love non-Power 5 FBS football. There's more consistency to the inconsistency. Teams play much more polarized home versus road. They definitely have more transparency numerically, and it is not the robotic, just on the number stuff you find in the big conferences, such as the Big Ten and the SEC, which honestly are my least two favorite conferences to bet. So going to the Gun as we open up here, the UTEP Miners, Texas El Paso, looking at a bull market this year, 5-7 last year, over 5.5 is the number. Guns picks. Let's talk about it.
Listen, this is one of those surprise teams that we used to remember. Like a couple years back, we talked about UTSA and how much we love them. This is kind of in one of those positions right now, especially with a lot of teams moving out of this conference and moving into bigger and better conferences in the AAC. I think this is one of the teams that is a play-on team in terms of win totals and in betting perspectives, because I think this team is going to be undervalued, especially early. 8 returning starters on the offense for this one. The top quarterback is coming back, including their top wide receiver as well, Tyron Smith. He had over 1,000 yards receiving last year. They do lose their number one rusher, but that doesn't matter because there was a guy right behind him that had better yards per carry in Deion Hankins. You're going to see a lot of him and a lot of carries from him. 5 yards per carry last season. They got 4 of their starters coming back on the offensive line, and they loaded up in the transfer portal. This is the team that gave their rushers 4.3 yards per carry last season and only 24 sacks for a 6.3 sack rate. Going to be more experienced, going to improve a lot. On the defensive side, 7 starters back, including 2 out of their 3 top tacklers. Linebacker core is going to be great because they got their top tackler back and their leader. And also that defensive line is going to be stout, especially with how they loaded up in JUCO, getting 7 guys out of the JUCO to give them some depth. So the overall assessment on this one, the offensive lines, defensive lines are going to be absolutely tough. One of the best in the conference on both sides of the ball. You have an experienced quarterback. You have a star rusher in the making, and you have your top wide receiver back. They only have one Conference USA opponent on the road this season. Favorable schedule, 127th toughest schedule in the country. So to see this team, when you go down their schedule, I see 8 wins. This team has got over 5.5 right now currently. This is a play-on team here, folks. We got to be taking UTEP on this one. Miners over the win total on this one, 5.5, baby. Bang.
Yeah, and I think, you're making a good point here. Obviously, with a lot of the conference restructuring and seeing a lot of these new teams come into Conference USA this year, some of these teams that were in the conference not only last year, but going back a decade, are just going to have advantageous scheduling. There's no way around it. And that's why you're seeing strong figures. And, when I look at these, I look at the numerical strength to this. And when you do see a team at 5-7 and books move it up from their final quotient last year at 5 at the result to 5.5, and they're juicing it up in most books at 125 to 140, what they're trying to do here oftentimes is bait fish into just expecting last year to repeat itself, where people will look at 5 and 7 and say, oh, wow, I get plus odds to expect the same result. The line is telling you a northward story. And as Guns mentioned, go down this team's schedule. Guns and I had a little mini debate on Twitter the other day about the opener, week 0 here, 5:30 p.m. CBS Sports at Jacksonville State. A lot going on in that game. We'll talk about that more in the pilot episode of the Shark and the Gun CFB Knowledge for College. I believe that Wednesday or Thursday night. But if you really start to go through this, week 2, they get an absolute joke game at FCS Incarnate Word. I think we can book them for a W there. Then they play at Northwestern. Northwestern obviously has been horrendous the last 18 months, and a lot of controversy surrounding firing Scott Fitzgerald out there, which was, I think, absolutely egregious. You go down their schedule a little bit further. At FIU, FIU is an absolute gas can. New Mexico State making a move to big conference play for the first time. Sam Houston State making a move up. Western Kentucky, not Western Kentucky of yesteryear, having lost some premier talent on the offensive side of the ball. And then at Middle Tennessee State and Liberty obviously having lost significant talent too in some sort of transition. So I think you're onto it. And I think that's why the number is on that. So I think we're going to probably drop a handful of plays here. Gunn, is that going to be an official play for you there?
That is an official. I love the over on this one. Officially over 5.5 wins UTEP.
Okay. And just in terms of units for those who are telling, is that 1 unit?
Yeah, these are 1 unit plays. Listen, I'm not going to go hard and heavy on this one. I'm spending my I'm saving my bankroll for the week to weeks. This is just stuff that I like right now. That's an official. Give me a 1 unit play on that one.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And I'm going to drop 4 plays on this broadcast. That's not one of them, but we will move on. And the next one is definitely an official play from myself and a collaboration with the Gun. We had a nice conversation about this off the air, and we are fading the Jaguars, not the Jacksonville Jaguars. We are buying the Jacksonville Jaguars. We are fading the South Alabama Jaguars here, coming off a 10-3 campaign. I'll throw it to the Gun for some opening comments here. When you see the number at 8 off of a 10 total, it should tell you an under. Gunzpicks, what's going on here?
Yeah, when I initially saw this one, I saw it at 7.5. This was a 10-win team last year, folks. 10-2 they finished over the season. Cade Womack comes back his 3rd year. That's kind of like the resume year. 18 returning starters. You think that would be the perfect situation for a team like South Alabama, but you see the number here sitting at 7.5. But when you break this team down, you got to look at their schedule. Very tough schedule here for the Jaguars. 9 starters do come back. Like I said, they got Carter Bradley back, Damian Webb, who had a 1,000-yard rushing year. And they get their top 2 receivers. Both had over 100 yards receiving, including 4 starters back on the offensive line. Defensively, top 6 tacklers back. So really, you look at this team as this team's going to go right back to where they were before. However, when you look at the schedule that they have to face this year, it is absolutely brutal. It's way more brutal than last year, and I'll get to that in a second. Toughest games at Tulane, at Oklahoma State, at JMU. They have to play Louisiana, who's going to be a very tough team this season, at Troy, and they play Marshall at home. But when you look at what this team did, they won 10 games. Only one of those team wins was a team that had over 500 record. They only had 1. And the rest of those teams that they beat over the season were bad, bottom-feeding teams. So when you look at this, they did play a close game against UCLA. I'll give them that. They did almost beat Troy, a Troy team that beat Appalachian State, had a tremendous year themselves. But I think this team is the book is telling you a story. Why 7.5? Why isn't it not 9.5, which you see with a lot of these teams in these conferences? I can't back this team at all. 18, even though they bring back 18 returning starters, I think this team is in full regression mode with that tough schedule. I like the under here, 7.5, 8 if you can get it there. I think South Alabama is in for a world of hurt this season.
I completely agree. And, when I looked at this, I saw the number. And as you mentioned, when you win 10 and all of a sudden the number's at 8, the books are telling you a story. They're telling you a regression story. As you mentioned last year, a lot of one-possession wins and a lot of wins against teams that are purely lackluster compared to the schedule this year. And you really start to go down. I'll jump off. You obviously mentioned it, but this team, the line I have is at 8 plus 105 on DraftKings. So let's just say for a push to get to 8 wins. Here's the wins I'll give you. I'll give you Southeast Louisiana. That is obviously not a Division 1A opponent. I'll give you Central Michigan, who's supposed to be mediocre out of the MAC this year. I'll give you Southern Miss at home, although I think that game will be an absolute coin flip. I will give you Louisiana at home, Ark State at home, Marshall at home. That's 6. I'll give you Texas State on the road, and then that's 7. What other game are you going to win? At Troy, at James Madison, at Tulane, at Oklahoma State? I don't know.
No.
I just think that, obviously this is these future totals can be sharp, but point is, you get this at under 8 for plus 105. I think you are free rolling a push here. I don't think there's any shot in hell this team gets to 9. So I'm on this. I'm playing these half units for myself. This is my first official of the broadcast. Under 8 plus 105 for South Alabama, half unit. Let's continue in this conference. Obviously, you guys know we love the Sun Belt. We've had immense success betting this conference the last few seasons. The Gun, obviously coming off a campaign of excellence only, looking to not do anything different, just keep moving up in the units accumulation, if you want to call it that. But let's talk about this conference a little bit. A lot of moving parts. Guns, I wanted to discuss, I'm looking at it now, excuse me, I misclicked on my screen. I wanted to discuss Marshall and Georgia State. I think let's talk about Georgia State first. I really like a bull market on this Georgia State team, and let me just pull up the schedule here, gentlemen. Ladies, gentlemen, of course, we thank you for joining us on this Wednesday night. Looking here, Georgia State Panthers. Okay, so last year, this team went 4-8, and they did go 3-5 in conference. Numerous points as to why they will improve. First of all, they started out 0-4 and did finish 4-4. And if you guys remember last year, a lot of the early season prognostication, not so much just in team totals futures, but actually the handicapping of the sport, is finding teams that last year really found some momentum late in the year and will continue that into training camp, off-season workouts, into week 0 and 1 this year. And I really think this is a team that's going to do that. And that's why the number is showing a northward regression point. Again, 4-8 last year. We're looking at over 5.5 at plus 135. And this is the key point on that as well from the book standpoint. Books have the under juiced. Same thing I said about the other play. When you see a team that's 4-8 and they have the line at 5.5 and they have the under juiced, they're really trying to bait people into betting the same idea as last year when they're actually moving the average against that. And if you really go through it even in some more detail, of their 8 losses, they did have 4 one-possession losses, 3 that were fairly excruciating, and I would say 2 that were absolutely inexcusable. They lost to a horrible Charlotte team last year in week 3 on September 17th, 42-41. I believe they were favored by close to 2 touchdowns in that game. They were coming off of a home game against UNC, obviously an out-of-conference big-time game, which we did bet last year at plus 7.5, and they did cover it by a hook, 35-28. So they let down. But here's the key point. It's one thing to let down off of a real tough game, big game against UNC. That's fine. Don't cover the spread. We don't care. Don't lose outright to Charlotte 42-41. And that was really symptomatic to who this team was last year. They could score the ball with anybody, but their defense was an absolute sieve and would truthfully give it back just as quickly as the offense would get it. Continuing on that, they did proceed to win 4 out of 5 games mid-season. Some impressive wins at Army, Georgia Southern at home, Old Dominion at home, at Southern Miss, a blowout. But they did close the season with 3 more brutal losses. Not necessarily brutal in terms of strength of schedule, but just the nature of the losses where, again, you expect them to win more of these tight window games than not. Last year, their 4 wins were by 17, 8, 14, and 28. So all with some margin. Those losses I'm talking about by 1, 3, 2, and 5. They did not have 1 close win, but they had 4 close losses. And it was against ULM, the Warhawks, at home last year, Saturday, November 12th. Just as inexcusable as the loss to Charlotte, Those are the two that they absolutely had no business losing. They played JMU real tight on the road late season, and they played Marshall real tight on the road late season. Marshall and James Madison are far classier than this team theoretically. This is a huge upward buy point on this for another half unit at over 5.5 plus 135. Guns, any comments on this one?
Yeah, I think the one key point on Georgia State on this one is like we always like to pick on those teams that have those OC quarterback packages. So you have this OC from Fordham. He does move over and he takes off as the OC. Was there at Fordham for 4 years. He also brings his quarterback with him. So you have a guy that knows the system. I believe he's a sophomore, last name Wilson, I believe. So with that move and that relationship between the OC and the quarterback, the transition in the offense is a little bit more smoother. You saw it with Penix. You saw it years ago with Bailey Zappi, my guy from Western Kentucky, the pride of Houston Baptist. I was like, you've seen this happen so often, and you're going to see it again here. I mean, you can even take Williams with USC and Lincoln Riley. Same type of scenario. It works. It's perfect. And you're seeing a lot of teams do it this year. This is one of those teams. This is why you're going to be taking that over.
Yeah, without question, without question. And continuing this conference, I want to talk about under UAB. I'll throw it to the Gun first. Guns, talk to me about this team and this roster a little bit, if you have anything on it. If you don't, that's fine.
But with UAB, UAB is one of those teams that, like, you know, everybody. I mean, they were a powerhouse for years, right? They were the team that would own the Sun Belt. So they, 10 wins, 11 wins. They would get to the conference championships and they win. Last year, they had a humongous, significant drop off. Only 6 wins, barely getting to the bowl. And this is one of those teams that seems to be regressing overall. Maybe it's their lack of leadership. Maybe it's the transition in the coaching. It's one of those teams that's kind of dropping off the map a little bit, kind of regressing back to before they got suspended and didn't even have a program. So I think that's what's happening there at UAB. Nothing on the roster per se, but it's just one of those teams that looks like they're on the down skid rather than the up and up.
No, I agree, and I'm not on this officially, but I wanted to touch on it. I actually meant to talk about a different team, so I apologize for that. I caught you off guard, but
all right.
This particular team, if we remember the last couple of years, they were very heavy in the run game. I think they had 2 running backs who would just run it down your throat. And if you remember last year, this team was utterly, utterly confounding. I remember losing a handful of wagers with this team. Of course, they did finish 7-6, 4-4 in conference. I mean, if you want to really go through every single FBS team, I would venture to say this is one of the teams that gave away more games than any other team. I mean, they were experts at laying the ball down on the goal line. I mean, they were fumble specialists, and their record reflects that because their point differential was pretty outstanding. They were plus 90 in their point differential, but they were only 1 game over 500, which is astounding. So then theoretically you would think buy, but books are telling you sell. And I think that is a personnel change up here at this point. And again, I think if you're looking to bet this, when you see under 5 at minus 150, off of a season where, again, they did finish 7-6 with a huge point differential, statistical variance would suggest the buy point. But again, this is college football, and the roster changeover is gigantic. I would advise you guys to take the under there. And speaking of this conference, Conference USA, this is the one that I wanted to jump to. We want to discuss Louisiana Tech. Louisiana Tech sitting here literally in the absolute bottom point of the conference last year. 2-6 in conference, 3-9 overall. Speaking of point differential, talk about the opposite of UAB. This team was 97 points in the deficit last year. 3-2 at home, 0-7 on the road. That does speak to a certain point here when you play that many more road games in one season. But we're taking officially, again, half units, over 6 with La Tech at minus 130. And Guns, talk to me on this one. I'm going to bring up the schedule and we'll get into more detail.
Yeah, I think the key addition with this team is the addition of former Boise quarterback Hank Bachmeier, one of the best college names in college football. He's going to be taking over at the quarterback, and I think that's going to be a little bit of why the reason of the exponential growth of this team. He kind of left with a chip on his shoulder at Boise State, going into an offense that's probably a little bit more predicated to the pass-oriented, heavy style that he's looking for. You saw the move when SMU took Tanner Mordecai. I think it's a little bit more of that same transition there. It's going to be interesting to see how Hank Bachmeier runs that offense.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And obviously, Bachmeier had some sort of issue. I remember it was a pretty confusing scenario out there. Who was the coordinator? Was it Dirk Cutter out there with Boise or
Dirk Cutter? Yeah, I don't remember on that one.
remember there was some sort of issue, and he just, I mean, he was obviously playing, fairly well, and he just all of a sudden was off the roster. So who knows? But anyway, he's with La Tech this year, and as I mentioned, it's just an incredible number when you see a team at 3-9, and the books are putting out a win total that is literally double of what they were last year. And notably, this is not 1-2, 3-6 is a huge jump. And as you mentioned, Bachmeier centric, but I think also schedule centric. Conference USA this year has a lot of new teams coming into FBS football for the first time, and also teams that really are just purely lackluster. So let's look at their schedule, and let's look at their home schedule in particular. Remembering we only have to get to 6 wins here. They do open up in week 0 against Florida International. That should be a win. Week 3, they get Northwestern State at home. That should be a win. Week 4, North Texas also should be a win. Western Kentucky on October 5th. Might be a tight one. I think we're going to give them a win there. That's 4. Week 8 or 9, whatever it is. I don't have it up here. I just have the schedule without the weeks. New Mexico State at home. Another win. That's 5. Sam Houston State at home. That's 6. And then they have 5 other games to get another win. And they have road games at SMU, which is going to be tough. Nebraska will be tough. UTEP coin flip. Middle Tennessee State will potentially be a win. At Jacksonville State to close the year. You could maybe give them a win at Jacksonville State. At Liberty might be tough. But that all being said, this is a very, very strong numerical average from Vegas. And this is a team with a new quarterback who bottomed out last year in conference and overall with a tough schedule. As I mentioned, 7 road games versus only 5 at home. You want to buy this in all environments. We're on this officially over 6 half unit at -130. Gunzpicks. A couple other ones you want to discuss. Let's go to Florida Atlantic, Southern Florida, I believe in Boca. Shout out to you guys down there in Boca, hanging out. Lane Kiffin clearly not there anymore. A much better scenario. Gunzpicks, what's going on with FAU this year?
Yeah, and don't forget Willie Taggart was there previously. He's out after an abysmal 5-7 season. But I'll make sure I give the proper love to the chat here. 29 in the building. Let's fucking go. Walker Bailey hanging it out from the boys. Jordan Bishop, Dabby Cab, Timmy 2 times. Go get the papers. Get the papers. Jared Smith joining us as well. Of course, Moose Money from Pub Sports. Let's get it, boy. And of course, my guy, Smoking Mirrors, big college football guy. I chat with him all the time. Love that dude to death. But let's talk about FAU on this one here, folks. 5-7 last season. Tom Herman, first year from his astounding resurrection in non-P5, coming from Texas. 88th toughest schedule. Over and under is 7.5 on this one. And I think this team is over 7.5 all the way. Listen, Charlie Fry is going to be taking over the offense. He comes from Penn State, positional analyst for them. He's also the OC at Central Michigan, so he has the resume. And then I love this quarterback, and I talked about him last year. He comes over from Nebraska. He got his ass kicked, but he is a baller. Casey Thompson is going to be taking over at quarterback there. I think that is a huge upgrade in the quarterback position at FAU. So I love that move. Top 2 running backs do come back. Top 4 out of 5 receivers do come back as well. In the offensive line, 4 returning starters for them. Very tough unit, full upgrade for FAU on this spot. Defense, they need a little bit of improvement, especially on the pass rush. They only had 18 sacks last season. They got a new DC to kind of help with that. He comes over as the assistant coach from Auburn. So I think that's going to be an upgrade there. They're going to put pressure on the quarterback. If that defense can improve under the new DC, I'm going to love this team a lot more. Great schedule this season. They get to avoid Memphis and SMU, one of the top teams in the AAC. Tough. They have 3 really true tough games on the schedule at Clemson, UTSA, and Tulane. Those are their 3. 4 close losses last season by a touchdown or less. And plus, with all the improvements with the offense in this one, I think they do excel more on the win side than the loss side. 2 out of their 3 opponents are at home too, so I like that as well. So scheduling wise, it works perfectly for this FAU team. I love this team. I think this team is a 9-win team and possibly a team that's going to be a contender here for the AAC. Give me FAU over 7.5 wins here. Officially 1-unit special.
The gun in his element. I love to say it. 2 words. The gun. Shots fired on a suddenly not so casual winning Wednesday, August 9th, 2023. It is the Shark and the Gun College. Knowledge for college. College for knowledge. We'll just look reflexive. Who cares? And we're looking for the top plays. It is an opportunity to dominate. I agree with this play. I'm just going to jump off very briefly. As Guns mentioned, there's so many angles to buy FAU here. Casey Thompson coming over. Rebooted scheme. Rebooted energy, new conference in the American. And if you look at the schedule, as Guns mentioned, you only have to get to 8 wins. I'll give them to you right here. Home against Monmouth in week 1, home against Ohio in week 2, home against Tulsa in week 5, road at USF, home against UTSA, at Charlotte, at UAB, and probably at Rice. They might beat ECU as well. As Guns mentioned, this is probably a 9-win team on the number. And I think you're getting here over 7.5 at a pick'em plus 100. That is a great number. I'm going to add this officially as well for a half a unit. I absolutely love this play from the gun. And Gunzpicks, let's move it to the Mountain West. As you guys know, we love the Mountain West. Oftentimes these games are late. They are action-packed. They go to 1 or 2 in the morning. I think college football is trying to speed up the pace of play a little bit, getting rid of some of the automatic clock stoppages after first downs, I believe, if not this year, next year or the year after. But I know last summer and fall, I was sitting there and thinking to myself, wow, this game's really going to take 5 hours, isn't it? And some of them did. But that's the beauty of overnight college football.
Oh, yeah. Staying up late. Get the coffee ready, baby.
This game might actually end at 3 in the morning, believe it or not. But let's go to that conference, and you want to talk about a couple teams here, and I'd love to chat a few of them. And let's start at the bottom. I think this is a really interesting point here. You get Nevada coming in here off a beautiful, clean sweep in the negative conference schedule, 0-8 at an egregious point differential here, roughly minus 140 in conference alone. 2-10 on the campaign last year. This team is not supposed to improve with huge significance, but books are telling you a pretty good story here with a 4 coming off a 2 and an 0-8 campaign. Guns, what's going on here?
Yeah, like you mentioned, this team was in full tank mode. They lost everybody. They lost their head coach. They lost Carson Strong. They lost everybody on their offense that was relevant. This team had a huge, significant drop-off for a reason. But when you look at them this year, 117th toughest schedule. Ken Wilson in his second year, 14 returning starters for them, 6 on the offensive side, 8 on the defense. The 6 returning starters, they lose their top 3 rushers, their top quarterback, but they get Colorado's starting QB, Brendan Lewis. He leaves the campaign for Deion Sanders. Decides to be the quarterback at Nevada. They get a great transfer too. So if you know anything about Ken Wilson comes over. He was the offensive coordinator, or defensive coordinator for the Oregon Ducks. So a lot of the transfers that are finally coming in to this program are from Oregon. So P5 guys going into a non-P5 situation in the Mountain West, which is a weak conference. I like this thing. And this guy, Sean Dollars, you're going to hear about this name a lot in the Mountain West. He had 6.4 yards per carry last season, and they get an additional guy for backup in Ashton Hayes from Cal. So from the running back standpoint, they finally have a little bit of motivation and a little bit of productivity on the offensive side here. They do lose 3 starters on the offensive line, but they go to the transfer portal and get 7. Then they have 7 offensive line with starting experience altogether. So this is going to be a well-improved offensive unit. On the defensive side, they get their top 3 tacklers back. So that is key on this one. 8 returning starters from last season. D-line all back, but 1 starter. Linebackers are really strong for them, especially they get a couple transfers from Oregon. So you're going to see this. This is almost like the Nevada Ducks is what this team's starting to look at when you see this team. D-backs are going to have to improve on the defensive side. They have 2 returning starters on this one, 92nd in pass defense last season. I think this is going to be an improved unit. So a lot of experience coming from the P5. Head coach in his second year, had time to build this team finally. Schedule wise, they get to avoid Boise, Air Force, and San Jose State in the Mountain West, which are considered the three top teams, at least from a preseason rank standpoint. They're non-conference. They do have a couple tough opponents in USC and Kansas. But this is a Nevada team that lost 3 games last season by a possession or less. No one really remembers that. Everyone thinks 2-win team. This team should have won 5, and they had nobody to give them any sort of production or direction. So this is a whole different unit, a whole different outlook, and a whole different positivity that Ken Wilson is bringing to the table in his second year. This is a bowl eligible team to me. This is a team that can win 6 games, and you're getting the over and under at 4.5. I think that's enough. That's sufficient to me. Give me the over 4.5 wins on this one. I'm going to clock the gun for you, and I'm going to fire the shot. Give me to over 4.5 wins here for Nevada.
Yeah, it's really, I mean, it really is a good look. I'm looking at their schedule now. As you mentioned, last year, three losses by 1 possession, which does matter. As I was talking about with the Georgia State play, it really does matter. It's purely just dispersion, and it's as basic as saying, crazily enough, if you go out on the street and you say, "Hey, I want to flip a coin 10 times," because that's pretty much statistically how it is in some of these games when it comes down to just one play at the end of a game. You shouldn't lose 4 consecutive coin flips. You just shouldn't do it. And that's pretty much what we're seeing with Georgia State, and it's what we're seeing with Nevada as well. So, Guns, I completely agree with you there. Not on it myself, but I do see -4. I do see over 4 at DraftKings at -135. You know, you pay a little extra steam. You do get a nice push number there if they just somehow don't get to 5. So, regardless.
I at 4.5. I was looking at the lines just at FanDuel, but like with these, like Shark's looking at, he's seeing better numbers just with a quick look. You just got to shop around. You can find those numbers that can get off a hook. Over 4 wins, no freaking problem for Nevada, in my opinion.
Yeah, without question, without question. And let's stay within this particular conference, but let's go the other direction. Air Force here, clearly not bottom feeder status, and I think improving off of a 10-3 season last year. Very impressive. Did sweep their non-conference 5-0, 5-3 in conference. In conference, very impressive. Plus 102 point differential just within the conference. And outside of the conference included, just pure domination. This team's outscored their opponents last year 362 to 174. And as you guys know, they run a very unique style of offense, and they can really, really dominate with physicality. And I think certain teams just have no adjustment for it. So, Gunzpicks, we'll throw it to you for some opening comments here. This is an over for you at 8.5.
Yeah, and I know this is not normally how we look at the numbers on this one, but I can't deny the fact that Air Force on this one is going to have a great season. It's a lot of it's predicated on having one of the weakest schedules in college football, 128th toughest schedule this season. They get both their quarterbacks returned. They do lose their top rusher, but their number 2 rusher had 7.7 yards per carry. I don't think there's going to be that much of a drop off here in the triple option. And then the biggest thing when you have a triple option style offense, you need an offensive line. And guess what? Air Force is going to have 6 offensive linemen with starting experience. They are always strong. They've led the yards per game in the FBS the 3 straight seasons, and I think it's going to be a 4th on this one for this offense. Last season, and I think what the success of Air Force is when they have a good defense, they're going to have a really good season. They only gave up 254 yards last season. They have 3 out of their top 4 tacklers back this season. Defensive line does lose their top defensive end, but they have depth in that position, so I don't see much of a drop off. The D backs on this one are ranked 87th in the country as far as defending the pass. They get their top tackler back and their 2 top corners. So from defending the pass, I think Air Force is going to do quite well. So to break it down, they had 3. This team should have been undefeated. 3 close losses last season to Wyoming, Utah State, and Boise, only by a touchdown or less. So this team could have been undefeated going into the end of, or actually going into their bowl game. They have a 5-game winning streak versus P5 opponents. One of the weakest schedules in the country, like I said. Their toughest game is really their last game of the season at Boise. And by that point, you've already gone over the 8.5 if they've gone undefeated, which they possibly can be with the teams that they have to play. And then you just look at the success and the efficiency of Air Force. So you look at the full 3 regular seasons. Let's throw out the COVID year because they only played like 5 or 6 games. 10 wins in 2019, 9 wins in 2021, and 9 wins in 2022. Efficiency, Troy Calhoun, 17th year. There's no surprises with Air Force, but some reason when they go against those triple options, folks, they can't stop it. And I don't think they're going to stop it here for this team. I like the Falcons here over 8.5 wins, baby. Give it to me. Hell, they may win the Mountain West. So maybe take a little bit of value here on winning the Mountain West against Boise on this one. I think it's going to come down to Boise and Air Force in that conference. So give me the over 8.5 here, baby.
Yeah, and that's going to wrap up the conversation with the Mountain West. I want to talk about a couple teams here, which I think are pretty noteworthy. I'm not going to go into extreme detail. I do want to give a shout out to our guy Walker Bailey in the chat, talking about the Mid-American Conference, the MAC, obviously notorious for some very, very scattered, back and forth, inconsistent, unpredictable football. But I do think a couple of comments jumping off of Walker's comment here. I had not looked at Akron. I know perpetual bottom feeder, but definitely coming up with significance now. The one that I like here, and I'm not there yet, but I might drop this officially as we move forward in the coming weeks. I do like fading Western Michigan, and I like taking the under in their win total at 3.5. And just very loose analysis going through the numbers here, but Western Michigan, dating back the last 5 seasons, has been above average within the MAC. They were 5-7 overall last year, and I think this just purely speaks to some transfer portal, and I think just a team that really is going down as teams like Miami of Ohio and Akron are coming up. And I think you're going to see some transition. I think you're going to see a reversal in the talent and ultimately the weighting and the averaging and what happens this season. So I think within the MAC, my favorite spot to play a futures would be the under 3.5 with Western Michigan. Guns, I don't know if you have any comments about the MAC in general.
Yeah, the MAC is on my list. I got to start looking at that one. Usually with the MAC, all I can say about them is like on versus non-conference opponents, when they have to play that schedule, it's better to fade them altogether. They're just the weakest of the weakest conferences. They just cannot match up to the P5s that they play on this one. I wouldn't play any number on those teams. I'd probably just play like first half on the P5s if they're playing a MAC team. Wait for these teams when they have to play each other on that dreadful Tuesday when it's windy. Teams like, as you mentioned, Akron's a good team to take because I think they're undervalued in a lot of spots. And also, you got to look at Miami, Ohio, and Walker mentioned it on this one. They're one of those teams that when they play in conference ball and they play at home, they play their best ball, and they had a lot of the drop off last season. I think this is one of those teams that has play on this year, especially with a lot of teams like Western Michigan losing a lot of key players. As far as I've read, I haven't seen any good like key Miami, Ohio guys leaving to go to bigger and greener pastures. So I think there might be some opportunities there with Miami and Akron.
Yeah, no, I agree, and obviously the big takeaway comment here is I think, as Guns mentioned and I mentioned, calling them notorious, and I did mean that literally. I think this is really a conference that does have the ability to just drive bettors insane. I think the teams are very, very unpredictable. They're very undisciplined. The turnovers you will see in this league are sometimes of the quality of high school football. And it does blow my mind when you see guys like Antonio Brown, Julian Edelman, to name a couple, coming out of this conference where they do have a ton of raw talent. It's usually on the offensive side of the ball. And you will see some guys go to the NFL and obviously become Hall of Fame caliber players. But this is not a Hall of Fame caliber college football conference. Let's put it that way. So, I know late season action, they got games and weeknights. People get crushed in those games. There's no way around it. People want action, and they just end up gambling, and they might as well be down in the street flipping dice and flipping coins. And jumping off that, a couple more teams here before we wrap up with Guns' favorite Notre Dame. And he's going to have, I'm sure, some comments there with some energy. But I want to talk about a couple bottom feeders, which I really thought had some sort of access numerically here. I do like fading UConn this year. I think UConn under 5 at -115 is a good look. And I think, first of all, I think it's a good number. This team did win 6 games last year. That was far more than historically they are generally expected to do. And now books are moving it down, and I think they're having a slightly more difficult schedule, which is why it's being moved down. But if you really look at their schedule, I'll go through it. We have a few minutes here, not in too much detail or length, but they open up with some tough games. NC State, that's a loss. At Georgia State, that's a loss. They play Duke, Utah State, at Rice, home against USF. They might win that one. At BC, at Tennessee, that'll be an obliteration. At James Madison, that's a loss. So going through this, they have, I believe, this is why it's 5. I think they have 4 games they're supposed to win. Home against Florida International, home against Sacred Heart, who is an FBS team, or excuse me, an FCS team from Connecticut, not particularly noted for their college football talent. And I do think they could get South Florida at home, maybe Utah State, that's 4. This is at best a push, in my opinion. If you bet this, if you bet the under 5, I think you're free rolling. I think there's no shot they get over 5 wins this year. And I think one of their crucial games is going to be the final game of the season at UMass. Bit of a regional rivalry game here between these 2 state schools in New England, and 2 teams that are really just historically awful. But I do think it's very interesting that they're downgrading UConn from 6 wins in the final result last year to 5 on the total this year. And they're actually upgrading UMass from a 1-11 campaign to an over 2, juiced to 130. And ultimately, I think they're telling you this year UMass might beat UConn in the finale. And, we've never really dabbled in that, but I do think there might be some value in betting UMass in the final game of the season. And if you look at last year, final point on this before I throw it back to the gun, Connecticut did hammer UMass last year at home on Friday, November 4th, 27-10. This is a reversal, and if you guys are trying to bet this stuff, sharp look is 100% the under 5 on UConn, and I think it's a sharp look to buy the over 2 at -130 with UMass. That's very noteworthy for a team that does not win a lot of football games to be actually upgraded to 2 wins with some juice northward there. That's all I got on that, Gun. If you want to discuss any more teams, go for it, or if you want to close it out with some Notre Dame conversation.
I just looking at my board here. I think I just want to talk. I want to talk about one of those teams, and I wanted to bring up all the darlings that were from last year, the teams that kind of played above their pay grade and had an immaculate season. And this is probably the number one I could think of that had an immaculate season is Tulane Green Wave. They're coming out of the AAC. One of the best seasons they've ever had since 1998, I believe. This is the first major bowl that they've had since 1949. The guy named Red was their head coach. That's how old this was. So they're coming off a 12-2 season, 7-1 in the conference, AAC, 14 returning starters for them. Willie Fritz is the coach. 86 toughest schedule, and the over and under in this one is 9.5. All right. So where you got to look at this team and what's coming back. So you got Michael Pratt coming back, had an immaculate season, 63.6% completion rate, 27 touchdowns, 5 INTs in 2022. But the biggest thing on this one, they lose their top offensive weapon. They lose Tajay Spears. Tajay Spears was immaculate last season. You saw it in that USC game. He carried that team into that bowl win at the Cotton Bowl. 1,600 rushing yards, 19 touchdowns for this kid, 6.9 yards per carry. There's a huge drop off there. So I think really Tulane's going to have to kind of go by running back by committee and then maybe just find that star. So it's going to be a little bit different situation than last season for this team. Receivers are less experienced as well. They do lose a lot on that one. Offensive line is going to be solid for them. That is a positive point for Tulane. They do bring in the transfer with starting experience from LSU to kind of fill in that one void. They get 4 starters back. Defensively, virtually at full strength on the defensive line. Linebacker quorum is going to be weak. They're less experience on that one. They had to go to the transfer portal to grab some talent. And then the D-backs on this one is a less experienced group. This is a D-backs core that was 44th in the country. That's pretty good for an AAC team. Against the pass, but I think they're going to have a huge drop off there. You got to remember where this team came from. They were a 2-10 team. I did mention it last season that this team was 2-10, but they lost a ton of games by a possession or less. So they were on the up and up altogether. They go 12-2, which is way above their pay grade. Finished 9th in the country. The last time this happened was 1998, like I mentioned, 12-0 they were. In the next season, they went 3-8. So you can see the kind of the pattern of not really staying consistent for Tulane. Not saying this will happen under Willie Fritz, but people were high on them early. I think a lot of people are going to be high on Tulane altogether. I think this is going to be a really public move for them to take the over, but they lose Tajay Spears. I think that is huge for that team when you lose a key guy like that and you have no replacements. Also, they have to play Southern Alabama, Ole Miss, at Memphis, at FAU, and UTSA. So they got a tougher schedule as well. I mean, if I had to take a take on this one, I thought under 9.5 was a really good look for this Tulane team. I think losing Tajay Spears, less experienced defense, and having the highs of just being a humongous. I won a major bowl from the AAC, Kumbaya. AAC teams don't win bowls, and there's going to be a huge target on their back. A lot of people are going to be jazzed to play Tulane this year, and they're going to get their best game over and over again. So yeah, I think that this team is not going to win 10 wins. So give me the under on Tulane 9.5 wins.
Yeah, I would agree. I'm seeing a pretty steam number at this point, actually. It looks like we're at under 9.5 at minus 165 here. So this line might move eventually at some point because you rarely see these go anywhere further north than 165. These do not usually get up to 200 on the standard number offering. So I think this might move soon. So it's an interesting point. And Guns is absolutely right numerically, as you said. This team does showcase zigzag year to year. Oftentimes they're coming off a massive campaign. Reached number 9 in the country, 12-2, 7-1 conference, just insane point differential, almost plus 200 in their point differential. And it will be a tougher schedule. It will be definitely a letdown campaign. And the number is telling you that story. When you go 12-2 and all of a sudden you come down to 9.5, they're telling you a regression south is coming. So I would agree with that. Not on it officially. I don't love the figure at 165. I think I'd rather get a slightly better price on that if I could get that.
I take him at 9 too. I think this is an 7-8 win team. Yeah. So yeah, if you can find a 9 out there, hell yeah. On the plus, all good.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's all we got on our list here. I mean, we've pretty much covered the bases with the best non-P5 buys and sell points in the futures market. I know Guns wants to make a comment on Notre Dame. Obviously, Notre Dame coming back here, I should say, 9-4 last year. Number is not really giving us a huge tell considering they won 9 last year and we're right back at 9 on the total. So books are kind of telling us, well, what they did last year is pretty much exactly who this team is. But Gunzpicks is certainly more familiar with Notre Dame than I am. So I'll throw it to him for some comments.
If there's any team that I've watched every single down for probably the past decade, it's Notre Dame. It's like I've seen the highs, I've seen the lows of this team. And this team, to me, I think the number is right dead on with the 8.5. And there's a reason for that. You look at their schedule. There's 4 tough games that are going to decide whether you get the over or the under on this one. But a lot of highs and hopes for this one. They do lose Drew Pine. They lose Tyler Buckner. But don't fret. Sam Hartman comes over from Wake Forest, all-time leading passer for them. He gets not only a great offensive line, which he's never had at Wake Forest, but he also gets the weapons in the backfield to do it. Audric Estime is going to be a star for them this season, 5.9 yards per carry. He nearly had over 1,000 yards. They do lose Logan Diggs. He goes over to LSU. But they get a great freshman in this Jeremiah Love. If you're going to watch this kid, he's going to have a great season. And they get a good transfer in there for Devin Ford. What you can always guarantee with Notre Dame year after year, great offensive line and a great running game. It's like they seem to have been able to have those year after year after year, going back to Brian Kelly when he was starting out. And at receivers, they do lose Mike Mayer, their top tight end, but they do get a lot of their receivers back, and they move Chris Tyree. If you remember, Chris Tyree used to be the running back, absolutely electric athlete. He's going to be a wide receiver, slot receiver. It's almost like putting I'm trying to think. Golden Tate. Golden Tate used to play for Notre Dame. You remember him? They moved him out of the running back position, moved him into the wide receiver, and lo and behold, he becomes a great pro at wide receiver. So I think he's got that potential, Chris Tyree. So the offensively, I think they're going to be majorly upgraded, especially on the offensive line. 2 future offensive linemen as well for them on that line. Defensively, a lot of guys come back through their top 2 tacklers, and their linebacker core is going to be absolutely electric. I think top 10 in the country on the linebacker side. They do have a little bit of downgrade on the defensive line with some pass rushers, but they got some transfers in there. A little bit questionable there And then the D-backs are going to be absolutely strong as well. They have a real good Ben Morrison. He saw him play last year. He's a lockdown corner, and he was doing it as a 19-year-old. I think he's going to be absolutely fun to watch. Problem is with this team, and I think it's based on the schedule. They have to go to at NC State, which is going to be a tough game. Brendan Armstrong is going to be the quarterback there. They have Ohio State at home. They have USC at home and at Clemson. Those are the ones that are going to be deciding their season, whether they're going to be a national championship contender or they're just going to go to another regular Outback Bowl with those games on the schedule. I think the books are saying this team could go 1-3 or 0-4 in those 4 games, and that's why you see the number where it's at. I think Freeman has a better team than he had last year from a roster standpoint. They have a top 10 defense, in my opinion, at least preseasonally ranked. They have a quarterback that they haven't had this good since in decades, in my opinion. So there's a lot of high hopes there. Unfortunately, I'm not playing this number at all. I'm just a fan and watching this one, but it's going to be interesting to watch what happens at Notre Dame on this one. And it's going to all come down to those 4 games. So are they bettable? Absolutely. They're one of they covered like more than 60% in the last 3 years. But I think in those 4 spots, if they're an underdog, they might be worth taking. But other than that, just watch a game and enjoy this team. God damn it.
Yeah, no, and I do think that the final takeaway on that purely is just as I mentioned, the number being identical to what it last year. So books are pretty much telling you this is who this team is. They're going to be above average. They're going to go to a bowl, but they're not going to be in the national title picture. And obviously, they're going to come up hopefully in the next few years to restore their quality. It's been a long time since the team really was deep in the national title picture. And I think that's all we got for you guys. I got 4 plays. They're all a half unit. We appreciate you guys staying with us through close to an hour here. We try to be as paced as possible and as efficient as possible. South Alabama, under 8, plus 105, half units. Over 7.5, plus 100, FAU, half units. Over 5.5, plus 135, Georgia State, half unit. And over 6, minus 130, Louisiana Tech, half unit. Throwing it back to the gun for his final plays, his official plays. We appreciate you guys immensely. Beautiful Wednesday night. We will be finalizing our opening points for the season. It will be week 0. Limited slate, but it will give us an opportunity to get in there with detailed analysis, the top plays, to jump off this 2023 season. It's a blessing to be here. Gunzpicks. We're going to have a great campaign. We appreciate you guys immensely, sending you all the best vibes in the screen, through the screen, and in your life. Gunzpicks, drop the officials, close them out, and let's dominate.
Yeah, these are the officials. You see them here below the screen. I got UTEP over 5.5. I like Air Force on this one, over 8.5. All these are 1 unit, by the way. Let's not get crazy with the name. Save your dollars and cents for the season. Nevada over 4.5. FAU over 7.5. App State over 6.5. Tulane under 9.5, and also the collaboration with the Shark. I like the under 8 on South Alabama as well. I think that is a perfect look here to start the season. But like I said, the Shark and the Gun are back this season. And if you want to know what the damn record was for the Gun, I will tell you right now. 2022 was an electric season, 169, 136, and 6, plus 45 units. So you want to go check my record in the last 3 seasons. I am up 80 units, folks. That is absolutely electric. I take the shots, I fire the gun, and that's how it's going to be done in 2023. Make sure you join us on the Sharky Waters Nation channel this year. The Shark and the Gun. We will be live virtually every Friday at 8 or 9 o'clock at night, and then we'll also have some additional games days as well, especially in week 1 when the season really starts on Thursday. We'll probably do a Wednesday night show there. So just look out for us on Twitter at Gunzpicks, at Sharks in Sports 88 for any updates and notifications when we do go live on this one. So go check us out. I appreciate all those guys that have been joining us, whether it's now or later. Please like and subscribe to us and follow us on Twitter, and we will be jamming through the season. Good luck with your bets. Good luck with the futures, and let's have ourselves a damn college football season. And as always, let's keep dancing. Bang.